Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the Kawasaki Ninja 7 Hybrid. And since it's been released, it's been kind of grouped in with the pure electric bikes from Kawasaki, which are early adopter type bikes. They're kind of first gen EVs. But this hybrid is a lot closer to a mainstream bike, and I don't think it's getting the credit it deserves. So in this video, we're going to do an overview of what this bike is, talk about some of the things that I didn't know before that I do know now, and just so you know, I'm filming here at Jim Gilbert's Power Sports, the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country, and I'm just gonna let you know it's worth contacting them about this bike. These bikes, the hybrids and EVs, again, we know they're niche market, and a lot of people don't know about them. Sometimes salespeople at various shops don't know about them, but I can tell you right now that the team here is pretty knowledgeable, and they're willing to see these things go out to you guys and see them go to a garage. So a lot of time I say check out the website, but I know from working in dealerships for years that generally the manufacturer limits what you can advertise a bike for. So give Wheels and Deals a call. The link is in my description because you can sometimes only advertise for a certain amount, and I'm betting this is probably the best deal in the dealership right now if you're looking for a good deal on it. So a lot of people are staying away from this from price, and I'm just letting you know the price may not be as far away as you want. So let's talk about the bike, separating the price from it, and talk about what it is, who it's good for, who it may not be good for, and we'll go from there. So to put this bike in context and take some of the intimidation of the new technology away, let's talk about what it is. Essentially, a hybrid is a gas engine that works with an electric battery and motor to give you either more power or better fuel efficiency, and often both. And that's exactly what this does. It has the same engine as the Ninja 500, which is the 451cc engine. Now I've been told it's tuned for a little bit more power just in gasoline only mode than the Eliminator. Now the original, when this was launched, the Eliminator was out, the Ninja 500 wasn't, so maybe it's tuned similar to the Ninja 500, but the point is it's a 451cc gas engine, and it has an electric motor and a battery pack. Now you never have to plug this thing in, it's just a regular motorcycle. It's just ride it like that. Now there are of course some differences in riding that, we'll get to that in a second, but at the end of the day, what this is bits and pieces, if you think about it in sort of your head and you want to kind of categorize it, bits and pieces of say that 500 Ninja class, along with sort of that 650 Ninja class, and it's kind of combined into one. So the performance is going to be similar to a Ninja 650 or something like that. Now there are differences, we'll talk about that, but some of the efficiency is not similar to the Ninja 500, it's actually closer to a 250cc when you talk about efficiency. So you're getting, they call it leader bike performance, which is 1000cc with 250cc efficiency. Now that leader bike performance is because it has a little boost button here that gives you a temporary boost of power. So for passing power, 0 to 60, that kind of thing, you've got a little bit of boost of power there that can come on for short spurts. But in general, overall riding, think of it as a 700. That's why it says Ninja 7 Hybrid. So that's kind of the class. I will say that there's the Ninja 7 and the Z7 or Z7 if you're from the States, and they're both in stock here at Jim Gilbert's. They're both the same price. There is a difference in the handlebar, there's a slight difference, but technology-wise, they're the same. So from a riding perspective, think of it as around a 650, 700 or so class, which of course in Kawasaki language, you're pretty familiar with that 650 class. So let's start at the front wheel, work our way back, and then we'll start talking about some differences. And at the end, we'll try to show you the seating position difference between the Z7 and the Ninja 7, because like I said, really that's what you're choosing. It's a little bit different seating position. So let's start at the front. So I always talk about the front wheel of the bike because it's really important. I always say you can tell the manufacturer's intent of the bike by looking at the front wheel. So first of all, what do you have here at the front wheel? Well, you have sort of a standard style tire. Now this is probably somewhat efficiency. It's not the grippiest tire because it's not a super sport bike. So a lot of time Kawasaki's advertisements about that leader bike performance, that's just more marketing than really design intent. It's in that 650-ish, 700cc type class, and you have everything kind of to match. You have a standard tire that you could get. Now this is a 120/70 ZR17, and what that means is if you want to get grippier tires, every pretty much every sport bike out there has the exact same size front tire, so you can get all kinds of tires for this depending on what you want to do. Now, it's not that these aren't grippy, but again, if you're thinking leader bike performance and you want to get a little more performance out of this bike, you can, but it's going to be in that class of tire that you would see in those 700s. Same thing with the brakes here. You've got the same type of brakes that you would see on the Ninja 650 class, versus 650, those kind of things. You've got the dual disc on the angle I'm showing you. You can't maybe see it, that there's a disc on the front side and the back side. So again, just around 500 pounds for this, which is a little heavier than some of the Ninjas, not too much heavier than something like the Versus 650. And again, so what you have here is a braking system that can handle both the speed and the weight of the bike, no problem. Very class competitive brakes and setup here compared to a 650cc bike. So when the bike's on its kickstand, the high side of the bike would be this side here. And if you look through the bodywork here on this Ninja model, you see something that's very traditional for a motorcycle, the parallel twin engine. You can kind of see it in there. Everything's kind of exactly like it would be on a regular gas bike. There's really not a hint of anything particularly different covered here by the bodywork and what they expose of a regular gasoline bike. And that's because what you're looking at is, again, this 451cc, sort of the standard Ninja 400 engine that's been stroked out, so it's got basically the pistons travel further than they used to in the 400, and now it's a 451, and again, that's in the Ninja 500, so you have something here that Kawasaki has basically bulletproof tested. This is a really, really reliable engine for them, and they've put it into a system. And that's really what Kawasaki does very, very well, is they take things that are well proven, repurpose them, and move on and evolve and evolve and evolve. Now, this is tied to a motor that is an electric motor with a battery pack. And like I said, it doesn't have to be plugged in. It does require some explanation, so let's talk about that right now. So hybrids can work in a lot of different ways, and Kawasaki takes proven concepts and puts it into this in a kind of a unique system. So what you have here is a bike that will run on gasoline or electric, or usually a combination of both. And then the battery, like I said, never has to be plugged in. So the way you charge it is two ways. As you're coasting or braking, it has what they call regenerative braking. What that means is the rear wheel is going to spin, let's say going down a hill. The rear wheel is spinning and it's continuing to spin. That works as a generator to put battery power back into the battery. And of course, when you're driving, it'll put the battery power through the electric motor back to the rear wheel. Now that's part of the system, but anytime the engine is running 3,000 RPM or higher, it's also charging that battery. So basically, most or all of your regular driving, it's always putting a trickle charge into that battery. And where Kawasaki does things interesting is that gives you pure electric range. There's a button right here on the handlebars, we'll show you that in a second, that can switch it from a hybrid mode into a full EV mode. Now here in North America, there's no need to do that, but there are cities, especially in Europe, that require you to run an electric vehicle only in town centers. So that's really the goal of this bike. The fact that they sell it here in North America means that you get to kind of choose how and when you're going to use that. In other parts of the world, it's a mandatory thing that allows a bike that is fully capable, has a lot of performance, but also is something that can be driven in city centers on pure electric modes. So that's kind of a unique thing. Now the question people want to know is, how long does it go on pure electric? And there's no direct answer for that, but basically enough to do your in-town running around in an inner city. I wouldn't think that's too many kilometers. I haven't had the chance to drive this whole bunch of kilometers because we want to keep these things new for you, but there's no real direct answer because it kind of depends. However, the dash will give you an idea of how many kilometers you have of pure electric range, if that's what you want to do, if that's what you want to use it. For most people, especially in North America, they're probably going to use that electric motor as more part of the boost, and that's the other side of the equation. This thing always has electric assist at some point, and if you hit that boost button, you really put in that torque. So when you think about the Ninja 500 engine, the Ninja 451 that's in this, it has pretty good horsepower, but not a whole lot of torque. What the electric motors are really good at is adding torque. So that's where you get that super bike-like acceleration for short spurts. The rest of the time, it's going to be like a 700cc or so bike. So if that all gets confusing, let me get a little bit more in depth. It's a 6-speed transmission on this. That's pretty typical. It does not have a clutch lever. It does not have a gear shift with your foot, which means it functions as either a fully automatic bike for some cases, or you can control the gear shifts through a thumb button and a trigger shift. Now on this channel I review the Can-Am Spyders. It's very similar to that idea, is that you can control your gear shifts, not so much by a thumb shifter and trigger shift. So very similar to that, and you hear the clunking. It's not a dual clutch, it's a single clutch transmission, but it does, you sort of feel those shifts. In electric mode, it keeps it fairly low revving, only uses 4 of those gears because it's got the torque to move there. And I believe it goes up to 44 miles per hour. I haven't converted that to kilometers per hour, but 44 miles per hour on electric mode only. So a whole lot of weird things going on. Basically what it means, it's a 700cc bike that gives you extra performance when you press this button here for passing or pure acceleration for short stints. And it also gives you several kilometers or a few kilometers of pure electric driving if that's what you want. Now, there is a difference in the chassis here because of all this technology as well. So let's talk about that and we'll work our way back around. So when we talk about the geometry of the bike, really the way that makes a difference to you as a rider is how it handles. So first let's talk about what's different and then we'll clarify how it drives and how it handles. So remember I said off the top that some of this bike is sort of based off that Ninja 500-ish, Ninja 400-ish kind of platform. So one of the things you can see here is if we zoom in really carefully here, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see this piece that you're looking at right down there. And if you look right through the center there, you'll see some of the suspension, or at least the coil spring. That's where your suspension sort of rises up into there. So if we come back out, you'll see that your shock is right in that area. Now on some of the sportiest bikes, it lays it down forward in Kawasaki's lineup, but in the Ninja 400, 500, it's been upright like that. The key with a lot of your weight is you want to keep your weight forward and low. So this shock is the way the geometry is exactly what they do on the 500, 400. They have that sort of upright shock, forward and low, but not the lay down shock that you see in some of the other sport bikes. The reason they don't lay it down is because you have a little bit more componentry, including the battery in there, which means you have to have the space for that. The other thing is you have an extra long swing arm compared to something like the Ninja 400. The Ninja 400, 500 in particular is especially short, which makes it especially nimble. So we're going to talk about the differences here, but that extra long swing arm is basically so when the wheel comes up, it clears the battery, which is just inside that bodywork over there. So you have a different design here to create space. It does look a couple inches longer than something like a typical 650, Ninja 650, but it also affects the handling. So let's talk about how that works. So when you have a shorter swing arm here, so a shorter bar there, tuck that wheel in this way, and you have a more upright steering angle, what you end up with is a very nimble bike that if it goes too far can become very darty and takes a very experienced rider to ride. Now that can be really good if you're on a racetrack and you really have to dart in really quick both ways. The Ninja 500 is going to be more darty, more nimble, more direct than this in a corner. But to be fair, that Ninja 500 has been, and I say 400, 500 because some of the information that came out, they compare these things to the 400. But that Ninja 400 and 500 is a bike that is a ton of fun to drive because it's very darty and very fun. Now, if you've ever driven a Mazda Miata, you'll notice that although it's very good as a sports car, it's less good as a grocery getter, even though it's got similar power to an economy car. So what you have on here is a front angle that's just a little tiny bit more relaxed than on the, say, Ninja 650, and you have a longer wheelbase with the longer swing arm that's also a little bit more relaxed. What that does is Kawasaki still builds a sporty motorcycle, but it's going to be less good for the track. Now, less good for the track is often a little bit better for the roads. It's a little less direct in the corners, which means it's a little bit smooth. And if your idea of riding is around town, slower speed corners, which this thing does well, especially with that electric mode, and country roads, country corners, and highways, this geometry is going to be just perfect for something like that. It's not nearly as slack as something like a cruiser, so it's still going to be very sporty. But then the other thing you find, if you've ever seen motorcycle drag racing, you see a really long swing arm, and that also helps with the anti-wheelie. Well, remember, this isn't just a 700cc style bike. It has that button here that can give you incredible acceleration. So having a little bit extra long of a swing arm there, although it does sort of relax the handling to a point where it's more street handling or good street handling, That longer swing arm also works to kind of keep everything balanced when you're really accelerating hard. So the look is a tiny bit longer than the 650 class, but the practicality for most of us who are regular everyday riding are going to find that this thing's really stable at speed, but still fun and nimble through the types of corners that we're going to face on the roads and not on the racetrack. So before we show you the controls of this bike, let's show you the seating position, because the seating position goes along with the character of the bike. First of all, the seat height is low. It's not intimidating. Now, because this bike can be driven in an automatic mode, and because there's no clutch, even when you have a manual mode, there's no clutch to worry about. You're never missing shifts. You're never, dealing with a clutch. You're never going to stall it, that kind of thing. So that can appeal to newer riders, and a lower seat height also appeals to them. So I'm about 6 feet tall, proportional 6-footer. You can see I'm easily flat-footing, very relaxed. Now, even though the bike is a little bit heavier, it's in no way intimidating. And I say a little bit heavier, it's not really much heavier than many other bikes, and the weight is positioned very well on this bike. So again, very good, very comfortable control. And as far as a forward lean on this bike, you have just enough forward lean to feel like you're in a sportier environment. It certainly feels like a Ninja 650 or something like that. Ninja, 400, 500 type thing if you've ever been on one of those. Seat is quite comfortable. There is some wind protection here on the Ninja with the windshield here. On the Z, it's a little different design. But you can see it has the clip-ons, and they are raised quite a ways up. So you're sitting here casually forward, very comfortable, with a nice sort of turn into the handlebars here, or the clip-ons, to give you that sort of sporty feel here. There is an adjustable brake lever here for reach, so you can have, not only if you're smaller or larger hands, you can put the brake where you want it, but you can also change sort of where it feels like that grab point is, which is kind of nice to have. So traditional brake here, traditional brake there, but on my left side, no clutch, no gear shift, just hang on to the handlebars, and there's some controls there that we'll show you right now. So taking a look at the left side handlebar here, normally this is where your clutch lever is. There's no clutch lever there at all, and you have a unique control here. So let's zoom into that and talk about what you have here. We'll zoom up a little bit here, or adjust the angle there. So black buttons are what we'll talk about first. There's also a gray button down here and a gray trigger over here. But let's talk about the black stuff first. First of all, there is a trigger above your gear shift. It's not something you're going to mess with your gear shift. And we'll talk about that gear shifting in a second. That is your traditional high beam. So if I push this out, you can't see it on camera. Maybe you can just sort of see it there. Push it out, you'll lock your high beams on. Pull it in, it's sort of the standard high beam. And then, of course, you still have the flash to pass. Pretty much all the Kawasaki's that I remember have this flash to pass trigger right there. If you're familiar with Kawasaki's, that's what you've got. Then you've got these buttons here, Sport and Eco mode. So you have the two modes there, and you can select some things in there. And then you have these, which are all different. But down here in traditional spots is traditional signals, traditional horn, and the four-way flashers, which I really appreciate, or hazard lights, which I appreciate. In the center section here are some weird things. Now I say weird, they actually make total sense. Sport mode, Eco mode, no problem. Select is probably traction control or selecting different modes in the gauges. And then automatic and manual transmission, so you can switch between automatic and manual, and hybrid and EV. So HEV is hybrid electric vehicle, and EV is EV. So sometimes in the hybrid mode, it'll still switch to a bit of an electric vehicle, but you can lock it in the EV mode until you run out of mode. And then there's a walk mode here. Because it has an electric motor, it can actually walk forward and walk back, which again, takes some of the weight away. The only time a heavier bike is a problem is when you're walking it around, whether it's your garage, whether it's a little parking spot or something like that. So this will assist you forward or assist you backwards. Pretty simple to do. We'll talk about that in another video if you want to know more. But then when we talk about shifting gears, this here is your downshift, and this over here is your upshift. So you have 6 gears, no clutch to mess up. You just give the gas and go, but when you want to switch gears, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's no clutch to learn, and again, has that automatic mode as well. So you have the fun of a gear shifting motorcycle. You can also put in the automatic mode, and of course, there's no clutch to worry about, so your shifts are always perfect, and you have no missed shifts and no clutch to worry about, no stalling. So very simple to drive, even though it seems to have complicated controls. Now, speaking of complicated controls, this is the opposite side. So this is your throttle hand. There is a way to push the throttle back. That also can be used in the walk mode for reverse, so there is some of that. There is a button here, which is what we're going to talk about. This button is the one that gives you a few extra seconds of really, really good torque and power. And what that means is that's how it matches sort of that Kawasaki advertisement that has leader bike-like performance or acceleration. You can press this button down and get so many seconds of extra power. So that's really where they're using that electric assist, almost like an electric turbocharger of sorts, that just kind of gives you that electric boost right off the bat. And of course, that's only useful for a number of seconds to get that full performance. But the rest of the time, you're still going to have that 700cc like performance. So you've got efficiency modes, you've got EV modes, and then you've got extra power modes. All of that comes because of the extra battery. We're going to take a quick glance at the dash. We'll show you more in depth and detail in a later time, but a couple things before we wrap up. So taking a look at the dash, you have something relatively familiar. Is that the same Kawasaki screen that you see on all the other motorcycles, but the software is different, and the software is really going to be set apart. Now at first it may look confusing, but it's pretty simple stuff. First of all, you have tells you where to press on your right side handlebar to turn on your start button. Sometimes this thing can idle. In other words, it can turn itself on, or you can turn it on and the gasoline engine doesn't start. That's typical hybrid behavior. If you've ever been familiar with a hybrid, you start the bike and it doesn't mean that the gas engine has to run. If it's all good, then the gas engine doesn't run. So it's just telling you, hey, you got to actually start it up. And then, of course, it has a gear indicator there. Neutral is sort of the standard. Once you give it the gas, I mean, you can put in first gear and give it the gas and off it goes. And then it have fuel gauge over here, battery gauge over there. And there's a number of different things you can cycle through from trip A, trip B, that kind of thing, temperature gauge for the engine odometer. And the EV range is up there. You can switch through some of the stuff up there as well. So EV range, of course, is going to show you how much range you have as you're riding of EV range. So again, you can watch that battery drain and refill as you're riding there. Tachometer across the top, because remember, this is a bike that you can shift on your own. It's got an 11,000 RPM red line, and of course EV and hybrid and EV type buttons in there to correspond with the switches that you have. So we can explain the dash in a later video if you want to know more. Just let me know in the comments. But let's do one final thing before we wrap up. Let's compare what you see right here with these handlebars and that kind of dash look. And I don't have the key for the other bike, but I want to show you the different handlebar on the Z model, because that's really the only difference. So looking at the opposite side of the Z or Z model, you basically just don't have the clip-ons, you have a handlebar. The dash is the same, but the surround around it is different because, again, the headlight turns with the handlebar on this one, and you have a little bit smaller windshield that only covers the gauges. Basically, they are the same bikes other than that handlebar versus the clip-ons. So let's talk about who these hybrid bikes are for. Well, from Kawasaki's perspective, it makes a lot of sense for having a bike like this in those European areas where you have to have an EV in the city center. If you're driving in and out of the city center, a motorcycle is great for that. And of course, if you go to the EV section only, or the non-gasoline or non-petrol engine, non-diesel engine, then that makes sense. But what about here in North America? Well, price has been a factor. There are better values for performance even within Kawasaki's lineup, right? You have those 650s which cost less and give you similar performance. So you've got to be someone who understands and appreciates the technology of lower emissions, the technology of a little bit extra power through EVs. You also have to be someone that doesn't need the clutch lever, doesn't need the gear shift. And I think that opens it up to a lot of people that are looking for something that's a little simpler and easier to ride. And that's what that is. So again, setting the price aside, we'll come back to that in a second. I think this bike makes a lot of sense for somebody who wants something that's pretty easy to ride with that walk mode, pretty easy to push around in your garage or different parking lots and that kind of thing, but gives you good performance and good efficiency. That alone, I think, is a winning formula. Where the problem is with this bike is probably in its price. And like I mentioned, I know from working in a dealership, and I don't work for Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, so I get to say kind of what I want. They allow me to review their bikes and say what I want. But I used to work for dealerships, and when you have a bike like this, I know the manufacturers can only limit how much you can advertise them for so that everything's fair. I know that dealers are looking to move these bikes. I know that Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals is looking to move this bike. So they can only advertise on their website a certain price, but they might be able to do a little bit better deal for you than that. And in fact, I think they will be able to do a little bit better deal for you than that. And once you bring down the price from the MSRP to a little bit better rate, or a little bit better price, I know you've got Kawasaki discounts on this thing right now, and if you can get a little extra dealer discount, you actually end up with a really compelling bike that gives you a great sporty cruiser, not a racetrack bike, but sporty type comfortable bike that does a lot of things for you as an everyday bike. You know, this seat pack here, you can put a tail bag on there, you can put a tank bag on here, you've got a helmet lock on the side, so you can do your everyday running around and that kind of thing. It's a lot of standard stuff, a lot of proven stuff. but it's also something you can go on longer rides on, unlike a traditional EV. So you have something that is kind of unique, gives you that EV thing, which, let's be honest, is not necessary in North America, but it is pretty cool. And it also gives you that extra boost of performance while not sacrificing fuel mileage. And fuel mileage is still a thing for a lot of people. So it's an interesting bike. Is it for everybody? It's absolutely not. But I do think that it's underrated, and it's been sort of dropped in with the pure EV bikes from Kawasaki. This is a more mass market bike than it's given credit for, and maybe it's right for you. So let me know in the comments what you think about this in general. And I know this has been a longer video, but there hasn't been a lot of videos on this bike that give it true credit, and that's why I wanted to do that for you. So make sure you get in touch with Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals. The link is in the description, but call them up if you're interested in this bike, because they might be able to help you out with a little bit more. And feel free to say that this video helped you give them a call. So thanks everybody for watching. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button, do me a favor, do that. We'll come back to these bikes again and again. Let me know in the comments the types of things you want to know. Thanks everybody for watching. Talk to you in the next one.